Elaine Harper wasn't your typical psychic. She was a force to be reckoned with, a woman whose abilities went far beyond the usual parlor tricks and vague predictions. Elaine had a gift, a rare and powerful sixth sense that allowed her to see and interact with the supernatural world in ways that most people could only dream of or have nightmares about. She didn't just read auras or talk to the dead. Elaine confronted them. She faced the spirits head-on, unafraid of the dangers that came with her unique abilities. Her life was a constant battle against the unseen forces that lurked in the shadows, and she had become a warrior in her own right. Her gift, a sixth sense for the supernatural, had morphed into a responsibility, a calling to battle the things that lurked in the shadows. It was a burden she carried with a sense of duty, knowing that if she didn't confront these dark entities, no one else would. Her encounters had taken her to the darkest corners of the world, places where the veil between the living and the dead was thin and fragile. This case, however, promised to be different, darker than anything she'd faced before. The air was thick with a sense of foreboding, and Elaine could feel the weight of the impending confrontation pressing down on her. She knew that this was not just another haunting, it was something far more sinister. This wasn't just a haunting, it was a summoning gone terribly wrong. The ritual had opened a door that should have remained closed, unleashing a force that was beyond anyone's control. Elaine had seen the aftermath of such rituals before, but this one felt different, more dangerous, more malevolent. Elaine had dealt with poltergeists, demonic entities, and spirits that were filled with rage and vengeance. She had faced down the darkest of forces, each encounter leaving her more seasoned and more wary. But this time the stakes were higher, and the danger was more palpable. She had even encountered a vengeful spirit possessing a child's doll, a case that had haunted her for years. The doll's eyes had seemed to follow her, filled with a malevolent intelligence that sent chills down her spine. Each case left its mark, etching invisible scars onto her soul, reminders of the battles she had fought and the spirits she had laid to rest. Each case left its mark, etching invisible scars onto her soul. The weight of her experiences was heavy, but it was a burden she bore with a sense of duty and resolve. She knew that her work was important, that she was making a difference, even if it came at a great personal cost. But the distress call she received from Marcus LeBlanc sent shivers down her spine, a cold dread that whispered of ancient, forbidden magic. Marcus was a seasoned investigator of the paranormal, and for him to reach out to Elaine meant that the situation was dire. His voice had been filled with fear, a tone she had rarely heard from him. It was the chilling prelude to a descent into the heart of necromancy, a realm where death held no dominion and the dead were but puppets in a macabre symphony of the damned. Elaine knew that this was not just about dealing with a restless spirit, it was about confronting the dark arts, a world where the lines between life and death were blurred and twisted. Elaine knew this case was different. The air was thick with a sense of impending doom, and she could feel the malevolent energy pulsing around her. This wasn't just about sending a spirit to the light, it was about facing a force that sought to disrupt the natural order of the world. This wasn't just about sending a spirit to the light, it was about severing the threads of life and death, a delicate and dangerous operation with consequences that could ripple through the veil and beyond. Elaine had to be precise, careful, and above all fearless. This was about severing the threads of life and death, a delicate and dangerous operation with consequences that could ripple through the veil and beyond. The ritual required a level of skill and concentration that few possessed, and the slightest mistake could have catastrophic consequences. This was about facing a necromancer, a dark sorcerer who had delved into the forbidden arts, seeking to bend the forces of life and death to his will. Elaine had heard whispers of his name, Alaric Voss, a figure shrouded in mystery and fear. This was about confronting Alaric Voss. The name alone sent chills down her spine, a reminder of the darkness that lurked in the world. Elaine knew that this would be her greatest challenge yet, a battle that would test her skills, her resolve, and her very soul. The voice on the other end of the line was frantic, filled with a palpable sense of dread and urgency. It was as if the very act of speaking was a struggle against an unseen force. Marcus LeBlanc, a rare book collector, had stumbled upon something sinister, a journal bound in human skin, its pages filled with arcane symbols and rituals. This was no ordinary find. It was a relic of dark magic, a testament to forbidden knowledge that should have remained buried. His voice trembled as he spoke of chanting an incantation, a surge of energy, and then silence. But this silence was not the absence of sound. It was a heavy, oppressive stillness that seemed to swallow all light and hope. But it wasn't an empty silence. This silence pulsed with an unnatural energy, a malevolent presence that now stalked the halls of his ancestral home. The air grew thick with an unspoken menace, and shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. He spoke of whispering voices, cold spots, and objects moving on their own. The whispers were not just sounds, they were insidious thoughts that crept into his mind, eroding his sanity bit by bit. He was desperate, his words tumbling over each other in a torrent of fear and regret. Each sentence was a plea for salvation, a cry for help from a man teetering on the edge of madness. Marcus pleaded with Elaine for help. He knew she was his last hope, the only one who might understand the gravity of his situation. He knew what he had done. He had unwittingly opened a door to a realm he didn't understand, a realm of death. This was not just a haunting, it was an invasion from another world, a world where the dead held sway. He was trapped, a prisoner in his own home, hunted by forces he had no power to control. Every corner of his house seemed to hide a lurking terror, every shadow a potential threat. Elaine listened intently, her own pulse quickening with a mixture of apprehension and adrenaline. She could feel the weight of Marcus's fear through the phone, and it sent chills down her spine. She had never faced anything like this before. The stories she had heard, the cases she had worked on, none of them compared to the sheer terror that Marcus described. The sheer desperation in Marcus's voice told her that this was no ordinary haunting. This was different. This was dangerous. She knew she had to act quickly for the sake of Marcus's sanity, and perhaps even his life. Determined to help, Elaine grabbed her coat and keys, ready to face whatever horrors awaited her. She knew the journey ahead would be fraught with danger, but she couldn't abandon Marcus in his time of need. As she drove through the dark, foggy roads, Elaine's mind raced with thoughts of what she might encounter. The unknown loomed large, but her resolve was unwavering. She arrived at Marcus's ancestral home, an old, decrepit mansion that seemed to exude an aura of malevolence. The broken windows and overgrown weeds only added to the sense of foreboding. Taking a deep breath, Elaine steeled herself for what lay ahead. She knew that whatever awaited her inside, she had to face it head-on. For Marcus and for the sake of uncovering the truth behind the dark forces that had been unleashed. The LeBlanc mansion loomed before her, a Gothic monstrosity of stone and shadow. Its towering spires seemed to pierce the stormy sky, and the lightning that cracked above only served to highlight its menacing silhouette. The mansion had a reputation, whispered about in hushed tones, a place where the line between the living and the dead was perilously thin. Even beneath the midday sun, an unnatural chill clung to the air, a palpable aura of dread. The fog that rolled across the grounds seemed almost alive, curling around her ankles like ghostly fingers. It was as if the mansion itself was exhaling, breathing out a cold, damp breath that sent shivers down her spine. As Elaine stepped across the threshold, she felt a weight settle upon her, a suffocating presence that seemed to seep from the very walls. The door creaked ominously as it closed behind her, sealing her inside. She paused for a moment, her heart pounding in her chest before forcing herself to move forward. The air inside was stale and cold, thick with the stench of decay and the lingering scent of ozone, a telltale sign of recent supernatural activity. Dust motes danced in the weak beams of light that managed to penetrate the gloom, and the floorboards creaked under her weight, as if protesting her intrusion. The once grand foyer was now draped in shadows, cobwebs clinging to the ornate chandelier like ghostly shrouds. The walls, once adorned with opulent tapestries, were now bare and peeling, revealing the skeletal framework of the mansion. It was a place frozen in time, a monument to forgotten grandeur and lingering sorrow. Marcus sat huddled on a velvet settee, his face ashen, his eyes wide with terror. He clutched a worn photograph in his trembling hands, a relic of happier times. His gaze darted around the room as if expecting the shadows to come alive and swallow him whole. He looked like a broken man, years older than when she had spoken to him on the phone. The lines on his face were deep, etched by fear and regret. His once vibrant eyes were now dull and haunted, reflecting the torment he had endured. The mansion itself seemed to press down on him, the weight of his mistake, his transgression, crushing him. The walls seemed to close in, the ceiling lowering, as if the house itself was punishing him for his hubris. He had sought power but had found only despair. He had tampered with forces he didn't understand, and now he was paying the price. The ritual he had performed had opened a door and something had stepped through, something dark and malevolent, something that now haunted the very fabric of the mansion. Elaine moved with purpose, her senses on high alert. She had come prepared, armed with knowledge and tools to combat the supernatural. Her every step was measured, her every breath controlled, as she navigated the treacherous halls of the mansion. She could feel the energy here, dark and oppressive, swirling with an unnatural intensity. It was a living thing, a malevolent force that seemed to watch her every move. The air was thick with it, almost tangible, pressing against her like an invisible hand. This wasn't just a haunting, it was an infestation, a perversion of the natural order. The spirits here were not at rest, they were trapped, twisted by the dark magic that had been unleashed. The walls seemed to pulse with a sickly energy, and the very ground beneath her feet felt tainted, and at its heart she sensed him, the necromancer, the one who had started it all, who had dared to meddle with the forces of life and death. He was here, somewhere in the depths of the mansion, his presence a dark stain on the fabric of reality. Elaine steeled herself, knowing that confronting him would be the ultimate test of her resolve and skill.